Hello, everybody, and welcome to our final Acro Credentials Chats of the 2023-2024 school year. I'm really excited for this episode to introduce everybody to new friend and colleague, Eric Shepard. Eric, thank you so much for joining on Credential Chats.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for inviting me, Noah.
Yeah, and Eric, you have a few different hats you wear, and so just for Acro members and folks who are watching this, do you mind just really briefly kind of introducing us to how we're colliding in this space through the hats that you're wearing?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So, I mean, just something about me that I sold a company that did assessments about 3 years ago. At that point, I said, well, let me try and help put my shoulder to the wheel and solve some of the problems that the talent marketplace is dealing with and that people thriving in the 21st century are dealing with. So I set up the Foundation for Talent Transformation, and it has a mission to help people develop 21st century skills or soft skills or learn about themselves so they can be more effective at college and more effective in the workplace with communication skills. So, and then part of that, I realized that with my background in standards, there was other contributions that I could make. So I chaired a working group with the IEEE on the recommended practices for defining skills and competencies. So, and also we co-chair of doing a data model on that. With that, I kind of got brought in to be the liaison between the IEEE, which is one worldwide standards body, and ISO, the International Standards Organization, that also works on standards related to credentials and learning employment records. And then out of interest, I also part of the W3C Verifiable Credential Group. That's another important player, and of course, One Ed Tech with the CLR. So uh, that's how our worlds have ended up colliding here now.
Yeah, and I was just such a fan when we first met, Eric. Because especially through that, you said 21st century skills, soft skills. I didn't hear durable skills. My feelings are kind of hurt there. But we talk to any of our colleagues over in career services, and they all say that our learners are not where we wish they were in being able to describe who they see in the mirror the way that we would describe them, how awesome they are. And I think that the talent work that you're doing there is just really so important. And one of the reasons I was excited to have you on Credential Chats was really that standards piece that you're talking about. That for those of us in registrar offices, enrollment management offices, we're hearing a lot about things like interoperability, and we're hearing certain things with standards and lots of alphabet soup, like you just shared with us of different abbreviations and trying to make sense of it. But for folks who are really used to standards being really, um, laser focused in the world of registrars and enrollment management, why does it matter for us to be paying attention to standards from other bodies?
So standards, I think, in today's world helps us communicate data more effectively. Just as an example, working with the IEEE, we know electrical standards makes a huge impact on the electrical systems. We have standardized plugs and etc. And so now the power company doesn't have to own everything all the way to your toaster. There's these standards that kind of connect everything together. And that's what's happening with verifiable credentials and learning employment records. So schools can issue verifiable credentials. They can go into a wallet. So all of these things, we're developing standards, have standards. Those credentials can then be represented for college admission. Those credentials can be represented to employers when you're going for a job. And the great thing we've seen in the last couple of years is that credentials are now representing the definitions of skills and competencies. So now for an individual, we can look at the skills and competencies required for a job. We can look at the skills and competencies that are in our current credentials. We can do a gap analysis and say, oh, these are the credentials I need to earn. These are the skills and competencies I need to learn. Where can I get those things? Oh, I could do a 2-week bootcamp course. I could do a 2-year degree. I could do other experiences, learning experiences. So it's kind of connecting the end-to-end chain using standards and data exchange.
And I want to follow up on something you just said there, Eric. You said representing the definitions of skills and competencies. And so, for somebody who maybe is not initiated into this world as deeply as you, does that sort of get into, like, on a lot of these credential chats, we've been having guests who talk about operationalizing credentials. Credentials get used not just by institutions that issue them, and then maybe another admissions office someplace else, or for a verification that you did actually attend to a place. But does that representing of the definitions of skills and competencies get into a world of different consumers, different users of learning records outside of what we're used to, and that there's an ability to not just have an acknowledgement of the record, but actually get into the skills and competencies that that record is telling a story about?
That's exactly right. Yeah. So if we were just saying a credential, then that could be just like a transcript. It just says, at the end of the day, this is what you got this GPA, or you got this credential. But the skills and competence definition will help us identify which skills did you actually learn when you were earning that degree. So did it include communication skills? Did it include understanding nuclear physics? Did it understand these are the things? So it's not just a broad brush approach. Let me use a better example. Let's think about marketing. So I get a degree in marketing. But we know in the last 5 years, social media marketing has evolved and matured so quickly that the curriculum that was being taught 5 years ago is not really applicable today, because this whole world has changed so much. So if an employer wants to evaluate someone's experience and knowledge and skills, they can see what was that credential formally recognizing. Now for employment, what's been layered on top of that? Maybe the individual says, I want to go back and just specialize a 3-month course on social media marketing. I'll add that into my verifiable credential. So now I have a full complement of the skills required today. And I think now we're going to see this more and more. So we think about car mechanics. They've been fixing cars for a long time, but now we have electric vehicles. So they just want to take a 3-month course or a 1-month course to learn about the differences of electric vehicles. That can be a micro-credential, a verifiable credential, packaged up with the others. It can now specify knowledge, skills, competencies that I have in order to perform these new jobs that are coming along.
So instead of it just saying, so the course code might be in that last example of an automotive program at my brother actually oversees a program at trade school in automotive. So it could be the course number doesn't change from year to year, but we have, thanks to this different technical standards, the ability to tell a deeper, richer story about what's happening each year in the program. And maybe that's consistent year to year, maybe it evolves, but we have the ability to go beyond, this is the class they took, this is what it was called, and this is the grade they got, to actually contextualize it with language that hopefully means something to audiences outside of that particular automotive shop.
Yeah, you expressed it very well. So the employer knows what was actually in the course, not from course objectives, but what were but obviously they're linked, course objectives to the knowledge, skills, competencies that were gained during the course. Yeah.
And I guess that, because I think that a lot of folks might not be familiar with just how that linking can occur. And so, we think about, well, here's what we're calling it in this classroom, or here's what we're calling in this department or this school or college. And then it may even, a different school or college, it might even be within the same university system, might be calling it different things. And then, never mind other universities in the region or community colleges or employers. And so, would you mind just sharing a little bit for folks? Some folks may have heard of something called Credential Engine, and you mentioned One on Tech, they have the CASE network, but these different sort of data standards and platforms that are allowing people to start to have the basis to where that metadata in the credentials that's telling the story can be apples to apples, even if we're not using the word Apple to describe Apple.
Right. Well, before I get into the credential engine or the credential registry, there is a concept of a competency framework. So these competency frameworks have been kind of living in silos. And now using linked data, we can link back to these competency models, and we can translate from one competency model to another competency model. So we might find the World Health Organization provides a competency model for nursing, and Ubiquitous provides a competency model for nursing, and we can crosswalk between the two, and we can link those to a credential or a micro-credential. So we don't have to define everything from the start. We can link out to these models. Credential Engine has done a great job in identifying all the credentials that are currently in the United States. And there's thousands of them. I can't remember. It must be in excess of 500, in excess of 100,000. It's a staggering number. So, and in that, they've linked down to these skills and competency definitions, or they and their partners. So as a university, educational institution, accreditation institution publishes to the credential registry, they say these are the competencies being recognized by this credential. And the other part of that, which I think is very exciting as we move into this world of micro-credentials, is the American Council of Education now within the credential registry will recognize a certificate, a learning program from a non-accredited institution, but they will recommend a transfer of credit. So the Credential Engine, Credential Registry is providing tremendous value in that aspect. Yeah.
And I know you mentioned micro-credentials there. One clarifying point would be, this stuff is not exclusive to micro-credentials. That if folks are doing secure and trusted transcripts, or any kind of credential, they could still have this kind of linked data. It's not exclusive to only small credentials. It can be credentials of all sizes.
Yeah, thank you for pulling me up on that. I appreciate it.
Just want to make sure that I'm not misrepresenting things. And I want to I have one other question on the technical side of standards, but I also want to walk back to something you were describing at the very beginning of, we talk a lot about interoperability in this space, and there's the standards and making sense of things. I'm also wondering if this is an apt analogy for why some of this stuff is so important. You mentioned, and it was when you were describing the electricity piece, right? And I'm wondering, folks may themselves be gamers, or they may have kids who are gamers who are buying a pair of, digital sneakers inside of a video game, but and they cannot wear those sneakers except in that game. Like when they go and play a different game, they don't have access to those sneakers. And is that a helpful analogy, or do you think to as we think of this, world of innovative credentials? And you mentioned learning employment records, you mentioned the CLR, the comprehensive learning record, you mentioned verifiable credentials, open badges. As we think of these different things, is that a helpful analogy for why these standards matter for any, whether it's one of those types of credentials or all kinds, that the standards are what make it to where you don't get stuck where your sneakers are only good in one game?
Yeah, I think that metaphor of talking about digital shoes is a great one. I think another way to think about this, Noah, is just look at the history. For 30 years, we've been developing standards around learning, and so One EdTech, formerly EduTech, was started in the middle 90s. We had the IEEE LTSC group. We've had lots of other groups. We got to a point that there was a risk of having too many overlapping standards. And if you have too many overlapping standards, you end up just people debating about how many angels can dance on the head of a pin, which standard is better. Well, let's not have that conversation. And the US Chamber of Commerce Foundation have done a fantastic job in bringing these standards groups together, ensuring that we minimize the overlap. And so now we use the right standard for the right job. And so CLR from One EdTech, or we use XAPI from IEEE, or we use the competency standards. So yeah, there's a buffet of standards out there. Let's make sure that we pick the right ones so that we achieve this end-to-end connectivity, so that the person doesn't have a pair of digital shoes that they can't represent to their employer. Let's make sure that whatever they earn from their educations, that they can then represent to further education or represent to employers.
I really like that, and I have read about the standard wars. I'm hoping no elephants were injured in these standard development. We just have a couple seconds here before we're going to sign off, Eric. But you did mention the work that the T3 Innovation Network is doing, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, and just real quick in our closing moments, if you want to share with our audience the C3 initiative and series of webinars that you've been doing, and people where people can go to access the recordings you've already done, and sign up to get on the schedule for your upcoming monthly webinars.
Yeah, well, it's going to be difficult for me to say a URL here, but if you do a search for T3 Innovation Network, and you can find the sign up for C3. C3 is just trying to bring all these different groups together, from policymakers. So we had the governor's office of Alabama last month on, to the standards bodies, to the accreditation bodies, the American Council for Education, bringing on standards groups. So anyone that is in this ecosystem, so that we can have this higher view of how we're connecting all this all together. So that's the C3. It started out with competencies, so it's connecting communities of competence. You'll find it on LinkedIn, C3, Connecting Communities of Competence. All people are welcome to email me for any of this information, eric@talenttransformation.com.
Well, Eric Shepard from the Talent Transformation Foundation, thank you so much for that. And also, we will add links to that when we share this in the Acro Exchange, and hopefully I'll remember to do it on comments of this YouTube video as well. Thank you so much for joining, and everybody who joined us throughout this whole series, as well as today. We appreciate you, and have a badge-worthy week, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, now.